I'm going to be touching on a very small aspect of Ladakh, which is basically my focus area, which is regards to wilderness tourism and conservation. That's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about. And that is what everyone knows Ladakh as, these broad valleys, beautiful monasteries located on hilltops, pastel-hued mountains, lovely people, beautiful festivals. For someone from Chennai like me, when I went there the first time, it felt like I'm going to a foreign land, despite the fact that it's within India. In fact, historically, the northern boundaries of India have always been considered to be the Himalayas. And this is the sliver of Tibet, which has come into the Indian territory for different reasons. And it is a truly magical land, as the topic of today's talk mentions. So it's been an absolutely brilliant journey for me the last 5 years, thanks to the people I work with, like David Sonam, Hashim Taibji, who was supposed to be here. Uh, I've got to see a lot of the place, a lot of wildlife. I got to go to some very remote villages where there is a lot of wildlife, but like Mr. Makhija said, the spread of tourism hasn't reached those areas yet. So there is a lot of potential in Ladakh. There's a lot happening, but to get to this stage, there's been about two to 3 decades of work that's been put in, especially with regards to this animal. So this is, of course, as it's popularly known, the gray ghost of the Himalayas, the snow leopard. So you get these cats above 3,500 meters. Sometimes they've been recorded even lower. And this has been my main focus area in my time in Ladakh. But we also got to work with these beautiful animals in Dras and Kargil, the Himalayan brown bears, which again is a different time of the year, because these bears hibernate in the winters when the snow leopard season is. And from April to November, they roam the grassy slopes around Dras and Kargil and Suru Valley in Western Ladakh. Another, probably my favorite animal from the region, probably the most persecuted of the lot, is the Tibetan wolf. But since we have a very short duration today, I'm not going to be delving deep into each animal and its conservation problems, but I'm going to try to put together a broader picture of the whole conservation story of Ladakh. So Ladakh, as Julian was mentioning, is the Trans-Himalaya. So this line of white, of course, as we all know, is the Himalayas. And usually when I talk about wildlife, I talk about green jungles and vast, large rivers and mountain slopes covered with bird sound. But interestingly, this time I'm talking about this brown piece of land, which is there beyond the Himalayas. So it's a very, very different place, a place which has been brought about by heavy tectonic activity 35 million years ago. And it's a place which is evolving even today geologically, as the Indian landmass pushes further into the Asian landmass. So it's a very shriveled landscape. It's very Martian in many ways. And to put it, as a lot of guests have said on day one, it feels lifeless. But the truth is, there is a lot of life here. In fact, the most obvious thing is, of course, the people and how they've adapted to this unforgiving environment. They have these beautiful small villages in mountain valleys. Usually the criteria would be a proximity to a water source or a pasture land. And most of these villages, as we saw in most of Mr. Makhija's pictures, will have a beautiful monastery. May not be as grand as Tikse or Hemis Gompa, but they will have a unique and an interesting monastery which overlooks the village. And the people lead a very simple life. Most of their farming is done in the summers, but throughout the year, they have their flock of sheep and yak, and that is their main source of income, sometimes for Pashmina wool, sometimes with dairy, and they usually live a very self-sustained lifestyle. So like the people, the wildlife is also adapted to this incredibly extreme environment. So this is a view of Ladakh in the summers in the mountains near, if I remember right, near Hinaskut. So this is a view of Ladakh in the summers, and this is Ladakh in the winters. So you can see it's very extreme and still very dry, which is why it's called a cold desert. It doesn't have the wetness that the Himalayas has, because most of the precipitation and the wet clouds are stopped by the high Himalayan peaks. So the Trans-Himalaya is essentially a cold desert which feels lifeless. But the reason it feels lifeless is because the animals have adapted so well to this environment. So in this picture, we have, as you can see right in the middle, there are two snow leopards, two males, which were coming down to a carcass. And despite the fact that it's a treeless environment, we can see how beautifully they blend in. And this is true not just for the snow leopards, but even for most other wildlife. They have evolved beautifully to blend into the landscape. And if not for the keen eye of the locals, and if not for the fact that they accompany you on these wildlife trips, it can be very difficult to look for wildlife in this region. And this is true not just for snow leopards or brown bears or burrell sheep, as you see here, but it's true even for the Apollo butterflies or the snakes that come out in the summers or the small pikas to the birds. So everything in Ladakh, you really need to train your eye to it. So Ladakh, as we know it, was 95,000 square kilometer roughly, if I remember right. But after the accession of Aksai Chin by the Chinese forces in 62, we have about 68,000 square kilometers in Ladakh, with a population density of less than 3 people per square kilometer. So that is essentially Ladakh. But there was no protected area for wildlife in Ladakh till the 80s, when Hemis National Park, which is interestingly the largest national park in the country, was set up in the 80s. And this was set up to preserve the snow leopard and its environment. But unlike the rest of the country, by setting up a tiger reserve, we protect the tigers. The story here is very different, because the landscape is a very smooth mosaic between villages, mountains, valleys, and wildlife. And the boundaries in most cases are very porous. And as you can see in this picture, this is a village of Kanji, which is in central Ladakh. And here you can see that the cattle and the sheep and the goats and the yak are kept in open corrals, usually to protect them from the wind and keep them indoors at night. So one of the biggest problems for Ladakh on the local people was conflict with snow leopards and wolves. So there was a lot of retaliatory killing despite the best interests of the people. Most of them are love their wildlife, they revere them, but when your bread and butter, which is sometimes 40 to 50 sheep get killed in one night if a snow leopard gets into the pen. So it is a big loss for a farmer in the remote mountains of Ladakh. And as we can imagine, the compensation schemes sometimes take months to process, by which time the farmers already spent a lot of time visiting different official bodies to get it processed. So this was a big challenge. And another big challenge was, unlike the tiger, these animals, these snow leopards, were not easy to access or understand. So firstly, to solve the problem, there needed to be an understanding of the carnivore, which was roaming these landscapes, which was very minimal, to be honest, in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there were studies done by George Schaller, there were studies done in Rumbak, Hemis National Park by Dr. Raghuchand Dawat. All of them brought a lot of clarity. But this person here, Rinchen Wangchuk, the late founding director of Snow Leopard Conservancy India Trust, took it upon himself and his organization to really study the snow leopards that were living in the national park area. So Rumbak was a study area, and they spent a lot of time trying to understand where these cats move, how many cats are there, what are the family dynamics, where are they roaming, are they in the valleys, are they in the mountains, do they roam at day, do they roam at night? There were so many unanswered questions. And most of the questions were answered by setting up well-planned camera traps, climbing the ridges every day to check the camera traps, understanding the different snow leopards that were there in the area, studying their droppings to see what they were feeding on at different times of the year. So there was a whole lot of studies that were done. And these studies revealed a very interesting world of the snow leopard, which is also the reason why we have tourism and a genuine possibility of seeing a snow leopard in Ladakh today. So in this process, Dr. Rinchen, being a local, was able to gather all the support of the local communities there and use their insights, use their keen eye to study and understand these cats. So in the process, what happened was all these local people became participants in this study and conservation process. So they honed the skills to find snow leopards, and being intrinsically cheerful people, slowly the program of homestays was introduced, where they hosted these wildlife enthusiasts who come from all over the world, and they take them out from their houses to look for snow leopards in Hemis National Park. So this was a hugely successful program, the one that won many awards. In fact, there was so much thought put into it that they even made small dolls using yak and sheep wool to augment their income. So this is actually one of the best souvenirs to get from Ladakh because it is made by the locals. The money goes straight into the local community when you buy one of these. So all of these training was provided by the Snow Leopard Conservancy. The people benefited from it, and slowly the money started pouring into the local communities, and the conflict wasn't all that much. But we have to remember that this was all restricted to the Rumbak or the Hemis National Park area for a very long time, because as we all generally understand, wildlife tourism or wildlife viewing is always best in the national park. In fact, one of the biggest contributors to the forest department there was the Swarovski optic brand, and they gave in their optics to help the locals study and observe snow leopards better. So this was a huge step and probably one of the biggest investments made by an optic company in a foreign land to support conservation. So Swarovski played a big role in this. And as we can see, we had people from all over the world flocking to Ladakh in the winter months to get a view of these beautiful cats. And the locals, as they did it year after year, they became absolute experts in finding these cats. I mean, for those of you who have come to Ladakh with me or with the other organizations that do snow leopard tours, every time you see one, it's amazing to see the cat. But what is more amazing is how the locals find it. It is truly a magic trick is what they do every single time they find a snow leopard for us. But as I was saying just a minute ago, all of this was restricted to Rumbak area and Hemis National Park for a very long time. And there was a need to spread the snow leopard tourism or the benefits of snow leopard tourism to other areas. And we have to remember that Ladakh is a vast area with a very low population density. So essentially, it's one big national park or wildlife sanctuary. So it was not very hard for people, the Snow Leopard Conservancy, to find other areas, and even local people moved to other areas and spread snow leopard tourism to different valleys. In fact, now we have 3 to 4 different destinations in Ladakh where you can actually see snow leopards outside the national park. And even there, in such areas, the spotters were trained by the Snow Leopard Conservancy. They became stars in their own right. Road networks became fantastic in Ladakh, which made it possible to access remote valleys, even get into the heart of snow leopard habitat. And in fact, this made it possible for a lot of people who are daunted by the fact of going to 4,000 meters in winter. It made it a lot easier for them to access Ladakh in these harsh times. So this is our place in Ladakh, the Snow Leopard Lodge, which came up from one such homestay in the Ule area. And we believed we wanted to work in areas outside the protected area. And we set up Snow Leopard Lodge as a slow, gradual process from 2012 onwards till now. And now it is owned and run by the local communities as it should be. And we just run it for them as a company which provides guests and training. So this is Snow Leopard Lodge, which is where we are. And lodges like this and setups like this are popping up in different valleys and spreading the benefits of snow leopard tourism into other areas of Ladakh as well. So this is just to give you an example of all these people as they arrived photographing a snow leopard from the parking lot at Uday. It's quite unimaginable for people who worked in the landscape in the 80s and 90s, because it is one of those things where if you see a snow leopard, someone wrote a whole book about it. And now it's a totally different thing to see a snow leopard in Ladakh. So what happened? What are the other benefits of the snow leopard tourism, the money which it brought in and the confidence it brought in amongst the local people? So certain valleys were designated for wildlife, for grazing. So they stopped taking their sheep and yak into certain valleys to make sure the wild animals get their due. So this is all the kickbacks which we don't document of snow leopard tourism. And one of the biggest benefits of snow leopard tourism was the fact that the urial, which is found only along the Indus and the Shyok valleys, was brought back from the brink of extinction. Because of all the development along these two rivers, the roads and the cities coming up, the urial, which is endemic only to this area, was the worst affected. But as wilderness tourism improved, awareness increased among local communities. And along with the army and the researchers and Snow Leopard Conservancy, the urial has been brought back from the brink of extinction. I mean, there was a theory that it could have been extinct in the 90s if things had been left unchecked. And of course, the biodiversity was brought back into areas where it was originally lost. People started studying, documenting bird life, butterflies, reptiles in Ladakh. All of this adds to different aspects of conservation in the region. But I'd like to give you one interesting thing that I noticed in the last 3 years. What happened was, in outside protected areas, snow leopards were regularly taking livestock, as I mentioned earlier. And because of the benefits of tourism, livestock predation did not bother the locals. So they were happy that they were getting compensation from the government and from the people who came to see snow leopards. And they didn't care as much when their livestock was being taken. But this created a different kind of problem. Was the benefits of snow leopard tourism changing the lives of the locals? Were they losing their way or how they lived in the past years? So a solution was needed, and Snow Leopard Conservancy, along with other bodies, brought in a very simple solution. Most of the predation by snow leopards was happening inside the corrals, and that is because the corrals weren't covered. A simple thought of providing the villagers a wire mesh and some wood to build this without building it for them, so that they become half the investor for their own protection and the other half and the support was provided by the Conservancy. What this did was it reduced, if you can imagine this, 95% of the conflict. And snow leopards went back to hunting wild prey because there was wild prey, but it was just an easier target to get to the livestock. So now simple tweaks like this, it's conservation tourism, and conservation is always about adapting. It's an evolving process. And a small shift in the mindset like this, or the application of a small tweak, like what we just heard, can go a long way in making the whole process very meaningful. So we've been talking about snow leopards. We spoke a little bit about brown bears and wolves, but there's many such iconic species in different parts of Ladakh. The otters of the Indus Valley, the Pallas's cats in Hanle, the black-necked cranes that breed in the high altitude marshes, the Eurasian lynx, which we know very little about, which is found in Nubra and parts of Zanskar and parts of Hemis National Park. We don't know anything about these animals in Ladakh, and we know that they're being regularly persecuted because for some strange reason, people seem to be okay with snow leopards now, but the persecution felt by these animals and wolves and brown bears still hasn't changed much. So we have a long way to go to tackle the different conservation issues in different parts of Ladakh. It is not one region, but it's many people, many different regions, each with their own problems. And we also, of course, have the borders with China and Pakistan, which cross-border conservation has always been a difficult task world over. The Chiru migration has been hampered big time by erection of fences and battle lines. The feral dog problem, I mean, everyone, even my friends who go to Ladakh say, oh, these bushy dogs, especially the ones from Chennai, my friends, when they go there, they don't realize that the dogs are spreading everywhere. There is food availability because of a lack of good waste disposal systems. Army camps become hubs for dogs, hotels become hubs for dogs. And suddenly in the winters, when the tourism stops, at least the majority of the tourism stops, the dogs start looking for other sources to fend themselves. And what happens is their numbers increase, they hunt wildlife, they hunt urial, they hunt kiang. And this documentation, and this animal is called a kipshang by the local community. It's a wolf dog cross. And I've been seeing more of these than pure wolves in Ladakh, and which is a very, very alarming situation because we don't know whether we're going to see wolves in the near future, especially a lot of persecution, killing of wolves is happening. And the few wolves that are left are mating with dogs, and this cross is coming across, and we are losing the pure DNA of the Himalayan wolf. So there is multiple layers of conservation problems in Ladakh still to be tackled. But having said that, we have come a long way, but there is a long way to go. It's not a process which only the locals can do, or the NGOs or the forest department. It involves everyone. It involves all of you who are listening. It's about how you perceive the destination, how you sell it to your guests, how you can contribute every time someone goes over there. A lot of these factors come together in hoping for a beautiful future for this Trans-Himalayan landscape. Thank you so much.